As I'm recording this video, we're now about 2.5 weeks into the 2021 and 22 NBA season, and one of the interesting storylines that I've noticed throughout the season so far is how the Cleveland Cavaliers have been doing better than expected. I've watched a couple of their games, and they now bring this really interesting strategy to the floor of using tall ball and actually starting 3 7-footers in their starting lineup currently, and a couple of them are out right now, but generally when you see the Cavs playing, they usually will have at least 3 guys on the floor that are at least above the height of 6'9 or 6'10, and when they're starting their lineup, they usually have 3 7-footers in there of Lauri Markkanen, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. They also throw Kevin Love into the mix, who can definitely be part of the tall ball action. A guy like Dean Wade coming off of the bench, providing some length on both ends of the floor. And overall, the average height on this team of the guys that are playing in the rotation is around 6'8.5", whereas the league average for an NBA player right now is about 6'6.3". So it's definitely been really interesting to see this team bring this strategy to the floor just because it's working for them really well. They're 5-4 right now, which is way better than expected for a team with not a lot of star power, really not a top 50 player, and those 5 wins have come in their last 7 games using this tall ball strategy, which they did use a little bit towards the end of last season as well, but really implementing it a lot better this season. And this is just interesting to see because we live in a league right now where a lot of teams really function around spacing the floor, having more athletic guards out there on the floor, and having more three-point shooters that, like I mentioned, can space the floor and play as wing players. And really the role of the traditional center and big 7-footers is getting diminished and is diminishing more and more as the years go by. So it's interesting to see the Cavs bring this strategy and actually have it work. So let's get into analyzing why this strategy is actually working so well for them so far this season. So let's first talk about how this tall ball strategy has affected the Cavs offense, and we'll start with the obvious stuff here. Obviously, when you put 3 7-footers on the floor together, you're going to create a lot of mismatches out there. You're going to have a 7-foot guy like Lauri Markkanen or Evan Mobley potentially up a guy that's about half a foot shorter than him at times, and the Cavs have absolutely taken advantage of this season. As you can see here, they're leading the league in dunks, having 60 dunks in total this season, which when you do the math and break it down is nearly 7 dunks per game. And when you're getting that many easy buckets per game and free baskets, that is obviously extremely beneficial to your offense. They're 7th in the league in points in the paint per game with almost 50 per game, and 1st in the league in paint touch points with 31 per game. So obviously you can see here that this team is definitely taking advantage of those mismatches in the paint, playing pretty well in the post as well. And what I like about these big men on the Cavs, specifically Kevin Love, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, and also Lauri Markkanen, is all of these guys are improving with their court vision, their playmaking ability, their basketball IQ, and overall as passers, they're becoming better. And you can see a lot of the times this season how the Cavs actually have a lot of big-to-big passing, and you can tell that JB Bickerstaff has worked a lot with this team on this in the off-season because a lot of them are very good at cutting off ball, and the big man that has the ball in the post is actually pretty good at finding that cutter as well. And a couple of times this season we've seen the Cavs have kind of those big to big passes which really allow that big man offense to flow pretty well. And overall they're actually 7th in the league this year in assists per game with about 25 per game, and actually 2nd in the league in secondary assists per game with around 4 per game. And that's where I'm talking about where maybe their guard throws it in the post, the player in the post throws it to a big man cutting to the rack, and these are where their offense really flows well. And something I like about this offense too is how they have very good playmaking guards. A guy like Darius Garland is averaging about 8 assists per game this season and definitely improving in the pick and roll, improving as an overall playmaker. And when he's running the pick and roll with any of these big men, that can be a very effective option for this team. A guy like Ricky Rubio, who they picked up as a veteran player for them this offseason, isn't a great overall player, can't really shoot the 3 well as we know, but he's still a good penetrator. He's very good at finding those bigs around the rim, using his bigs as a lob threat, and that's part of the reason why they get so many easy buckets, is because guys like Garland and Rubio are finding these big men and throwing lobs to them at the rim and running effective pick and rolls with them as well. Even a guy like Colin Sexton, while he hasn't so far this season, I can see him improving as a playmaker as the team or as the season goes on, and I think that he's going to find those big men rolling towards the basket a little bit more as well. well and allow their offense to function well that way as well. And as we know, Colin Sexton is probably the best offensive player on this team, and I think he is going to have to eventually adapt to that, and I think his assist total will get pretty high by the end of the season. Now, obviously, something that you might think is a potential doubt for a tall ball team like this is their spacing and their three-point shooting, and as I talked about in the start of this video, that is one of the main things, if not the main thing in the game today, and the main concerns of offense is it's making sure they have proper spacing, and that is so important in today's NBA, and it really affects everything with your offense. But honestly, overall, the Cavs don't have that bad three-point shooting. Now, so far this season, it hasn't been great, as pretty much Evan Mobley, Kevin Love, and Lauri Markkanen are all actually shooting under 30% from three so far this season, and as we know, Jarrett Allen still hasn't developed a three-point shot yet. But when you look at what these guys are actually like from three throughout their careers, Lauri Markkanen and Kevin Love both throughout their careers have shown that they can be consistent three-point shooters, and this definitely is a small sample size, and as the season goes on, these are two guys that are going to be able to space the floor for this team when potentially running a pick and roll with Mobley or Jarrett Allen as the roll man. And you can also see that Evan Mobley, you can see in the offseason and in the preseason, he's working on adding a three-point shot as well. So far this season, only shooting 20% from three, which is obviously pretty disappointing, but I think he could be able to develop a potential three-point shot as well. So overall, this team's offense is flowing much better than you might think for an offense with 3 7-footers, and overall it's working well for them, and as they improve that three-point shooting too, this will allow their offense to flow much better. So far this season, only ranking 22nd in the league in three-point percentage, shooting 32.5% from three, and only attempting 30.6 three-point attempts per game, which is 26th in the league. But like I said, with the personnel on this team and how their 7-footers can actually shoot the three decently, like Markkanen and Kevin Love throughout their career, I think the spacing will improve on this team, and pretty much everything in their offense will flow well, plus the fact that they can create a lot of easy mismatches with this tall ball lineup. So with the personnel that the Cavs have been putting out on the floor so far this season, their offense has definitely got a lot better, and like I said, I really think the guards are fitting really well together with the big men on this team, and overall the tall ball lineup is definitely working well for their offense. But this tall ball lineup has affected their defense way more than their offense, and the Cavs defense so far this year, despite it only being 9 games into the year and a small sample size, it obviously looks completely different, and when you watch this team play, their defense definitely looks like it's functioning extremely well. And last year in the 2020 and 2021 season, the Cavs had a defensive rating of 113.5, which is 25th in the NBA, and so far this season they have a 105.6 defensive rating, almost improving that by 8 full points, and this is 10th in the NBA. So they took a drastic leap so far in defense, and I truly do think that this is sustainable for this team. I think that by the end of this year, you will still see this team with an over-average defense, just because it is functioning so well for them right now, and they have such good perimeter defense, and you might not think that because of how they have 3 7-footers on this team, and that might create mismatches for them on the perimeter, but so far this season, the Cavs are actually one of the better perimeter defending teams in the game. You might think that this would be a problem for them, but so far they're actually holding opponents to shooting only 33% from 3, and this is 9th in the NBA. And when you look at the switchable type of big men that they do have on this team, a guy like Evan Mobley is really turning into one of the most versatile defenders in the game. He can really use that quickness, athleticism, and length to, despite being 7 foot, really be able to defend those guards out there on the perimeter very effectively, not get beat off the dribble, and while a lot of guards in this league like mismatches against 7-footers, if you get Mobley switching on you, that is not very good of a switch. A guy like Lauri Markkanen, who overall isn't a fantastic defender, but still does a pretty good job holding his own on the perimeter compared to some of the other 7-footers in this league. And then even a guy like Kevin Love, sometimes when he gets switched onto the perimeter, that can be a bad thing, but at times he can do a very good job of holding his zone out there as well. The only guy in this 7-footer group that I've been talking about so far this video that can't defend the perimeter that well is Jarrett Allen, but he's definitely turning into one of the best interior defenders and rim protectors in the game. And when you're running a pick and roll against Jarrett Allen and trying to score at him at the rim, it's definitely going to be very difficult, as he's definitely turning into one of the best shot blockers and overall rim protectors in the game. Now overall, the Cavs Cavs do have to work on their interior defense, which is ironic because they're running this tall ball lineup. But again, I think this is something that's going to improve as the season goes on, as Jarrett Allen becomes more and more of an elite defender, and also when he's off the floor, Mobley can be that guy that handles the defensive part of protecting the rim, guarding the pick and roll, and being that guy that is really the centerpiece on defense. So overall so far this season, like I said, in terms of defensive rating, the Cavs do have a top 10 defense, and it's improved so much, and I give so much credit to this tall ball lineup for essentially making this happen and holding their own on the perimeter when it comes to defense. And one more thing I just wanted to add quickly here is another obvious advantage this creates for this team is their rebounding, and how easy that can be for this team because they have such tall personnel out there on the floor. We look at some stats this season, having 16.3 contested rebounds per game, which is 8th in the NBA, a 36.1 contested rebound percentage, which is 2nd in the entire NBA, 7.3 contested offensive rebounds per game, which is 8th in the league, and a 66.7% contested offensive rebound percentage, which is 3rd in the entire NBA. Top 10 in all of these stats here, which is very important to a team. You might not think rebounding is that important, and when I look at specific players, I don't really value rebounding that much, but for an overall function of a team, rebounding can be very important for a lot of different reasons. When you look at offensive rebounds, getting easy baskets around this rim, which because of their tall personnel, the Cavs have done that a ton this season, like I mentioned. Guys like Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley cleaning up the glass very easily and getting easy buckets around the rim. And then when you talk about defensive rebounding, this can be very important for the function of a team as well, not just for their defense and actually completing the stop that they're getting on the floor, but actually when they're running out in transition as well. This can be very effective for a team to get a lot of defensive rebounds. That can really help their transition game, and that's also something that I think will improve for this Cavs team as the season goes on, with playmakers out there like Darius Garland, Ricky Rubio, and like I mentioned, Colin Sexton maybe becoming a better playmaker as well. So just a quick thing I wanted to mention there, their rebounding for obvious reasons has gotten a lot better this year as well. So there you have it. That's all I've got for you guys for today's video in terms of my analysis on the Cavs. I just wanted to bring this up because I think this is a very interesting strategy that I think is working very well for this team. The stats definitely show that it is working well so far, and I truly do think that this is a sustainable strategy for this team, as when you look at the personnel with their tall ball lineup, really there are not many flaws at all for actually putting this type of lineup on the floor. And I truly do think that right here, the Cleveland Cavaliers are playing chess while the rest of the league is playing checkers, and you could potentially see this team, despite not having a ton of talent and definitely being favored as one of the bottom teams in the East going into this season, I think if the Cavs keep this up, they keep up the good system that they have right now, I think you could definitely see them potentially get into a play-in game this season and maybe find a way to squeak into the playoffs. It'll definitely be interesting to see how the tall ball strategy works moving forward in the year, how they continue to fit well with their guards like Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, and Ricky Rubio. And I'm actually going to watch the Cavs game tonight as well, since they're playing my team, the Toronto Raptors, who are also off to a very hot start this year, and I'll probably end up making a whole video on them as well. I've been very impressed with the way they're playing, but this will be an interesting matchup since the Raptors do really play more of a switchable defensive type style and are really more of a small ball team on both ends. So this will be a very interesting game to watch this Friday night. But in terms of this video, that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you for watching. Comment down below your thoughts on the Cavs tall ball lineup and if you think it's going to work for the rest of the season, and I'll see you all next video.